Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host. Obviously, you know that by now. If you don't, you shouldn't be here. And want to first of all say I've got an amazing guest on today's show. It's an honor for me to have a guy like this on the show because he's a cool guy. He's an all-American guy, and he loves dogs. And he loves something that I'm really passionate about, which is military dogs. So we're going to have some great chats with Mike. First of all, if you're not a member of my site, check it out, robertcabral.com. Also, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all that crap. Just go there. I'm everywhere. You'll find me, and stay in touch with me. I love hearing from you guys. So first of all, let's talk about a guy that is an American hero, a guy who does something amazing. His name is Mike Ritland. If you haven't heard of him, Google him. He's got books. He's got websites. He's the founder of the Warrior Dog Foundation, which is one of my favorite causes. And we're going to talk to him about that. So let's get him on. Mike, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Robert. I appreciate the kind words, and I'm looking forward to having a chat with you. So I appreciate you bringing me on.
Well, me too. First of all, you're a Navy SEAL. You're a military guy. Thank you for your service. Thank you for keeping our country great and free. From the bottom of my heart, I appreciate all you guys who do the hard work that a lot of people don't appreciate and don't even understand. So thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you and the rest of the country for being worth the sacrifice. I can speak for most of us that have gone out and done it, is that's really what drives the overwhelming majority of all service members to do what we do is having a country that makes it all worthwhile. So I appreciate all of you guys as well.
Thank you. And it is the greatest country on the earth. I mean, I really believe that. My dad was in the military. I'm a big fan of that. And, coming into this whole thing as well, with military dogs, it's so important. A lot of people, crazy animal nuts, don't believe animals should be used as service animals, but they provide such an amazing service. And I truly believe that they're passionate about what they're doing as well. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely would. I mean, obviously there's an element of selective breeding that's taken place over, centuries that has, aligned the genetic code to have these dogs do what they do and from a drive and characteristic standpoint, kind of be what they are. But be that as it may, or having said that, there's no question. I mean, anybody that you don't even have to be good at reading dogs or a dog training expert or professional to watch a dog and just see that they're enjoying what they're doing when you see them with, people that they're providing service for, whether it's, a PTSD therapy dog all the way to a seeing eye dog or an insulin resistance trained dog, or you name it. You can see, the body language and the nonverbal communication skills from the dog standpoint that the dog is absolutely enjoying what it's doing and is where it ought to be. So I really don't understand the hesitation and resistance that some out there have, to using dogs for that purpose. I mean, it's a very synergistic and cohesive relationship that exists between human beings and dogs, and I think it does a disservice to deny that.
Amen. I agree with you 100%. And I like what you talked about, selective breeding, because it's so important that we understand that, not only were wolves bred into dogs and all that crap from a long time ago, but the most important part we don't realize is that it's in their DNA to serve us, to do things with us, whether it's catch a ball or something, or when we talk about this real intricate breeding of making a military dog or a seeing eye. We've got a retired seeing eye dog, so we understand that. Yeah. It's so important to talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I didn't even have that on my questions to ask you, but the genetic breeding of getting a dog to that fine line of being this refined animal that can do these things is so important. Talk to me a little bit about that, because that's what people overlook. They just think they're going to go to the shelter and get a dog and it's going to be their PTSD dog.
Sure. So I think, the parallels that exist between humans and dogs is pretty significant as it relates to, high levels of efficacy and performance at whatever given task you're talking about, whether it's, on the human side, sports, or, being a world-class surgeon, or, a master at jiu-jitsu, or a world-class chef, or whatever. There's certain genetic components that really have to be there for that individual to be able to do what it is they do at that super high level. And to me, when you're talking about, a dog that's trained at a high level to perform these certain services or augments for human beings and living their day-to-day lives, that is kind of the equivalent. That's varsity squad, kicking it up a notch. It's not just being a companion that's relatively well behaved. You're talking about, executing some pretty significant and, specific behaviors that are, relevant to helping that human being. And so because of that, no different than with human beings, is that if that genetic component is not there, I don't care how good of a trainer you are. And I'm sure you get plagued with questions like this all the time from people. They want you to do certain things with their golden doodle or their whatever that just doesn't have just the genetic skill set to do what they're asking to do. And they don't understand that. And it's no different than, having a 5-year-old that, just genetically is just not athletically talented or gifted. And yet, you've got the parents that want that child to be an NFL Pro Bowl quarterback or whatever. And it's like, this kid just doesn't have what it takes. All the training in the world with, the best quarterbacks and coaches and athletic trainers and whatever isn't going to turn this kid into a world-class quarterback. And that's kind of what they're asking. And so, to me, when I see, a lot of the adopt, don't shop and kind of anti-breeding campaigns, while I understand, like with most things, is that the intentions are sound and pure and their heart is in the right place. From my perspective, the reason why shelters are so filled with so many dogs is because people aren't being more selective about how they're breeding.
Absolutely.
And I wish that there was a bigger push for that. I don't think it's that people shouldn't breed dogs. I think that there's too many people that shouldn't be breeding that are, for sure. But there should be a higher level of importance placed on professionals that understand, the genetic component and how to breed properly and select properly and work dogs properly. Because when you have those genetically talented, gifted dogs that are cognitive and their cognition, they're driven that way. You don't run into the same problems that most people do that wind up, or having dogs wind up in shelters to begin with. I mean, I'm a firm believer that because we're not doing a better job at selective breeding, and you've got people that, well, I have a Rottweiler and my buddy has a Rottweiler and we should have pups because, well, there are dogs and they're the best, right? Like, well, no, they're not. If they're not serving a purpose, then they probably shouldn't be bred for that. So to your question, I think that the importance placed on genetic importance and those genetic components that we rely on in the working dog world to be able to do what we have to do with these dogs does not get enough importance placed on it. And that's, I think, probably the number one contributing factor as to why our society is in such a tough spot that we are shelter-wise, of having almost 3.5 million dogs every year being surrendered to shelters. I think that number would be drastically reduced if people were far more selective in both breeding and puppy selection.
Right. Well, I mean, I've been in the shelters for 12 years, and I've dealt with the most aggressive dogs and the most fearful shutdown dogs. The thing is, I think we live in this apologistic society where we never blame people for dumping dogs in shelters, but we blame people for not getting a dog from a shelter, which is just bullshit, right?
Yeah.
And, if you want a pet, I always say, if you just want a pet to lay around your house and watch Oprah or some stuff like that, go get a shelter dog. Just go get whatever you want. But people I've got a sport performance dog. I mean, he's done everything from narcotics detection to Schutzhund to obedience and stuff. But I want I want to hedge my bets as much as possible by getting a well-bred, well-reared dog. I want to know as much about him as possible. So you want to make that decision. You want to live in a free country where you can do that and not have some people giving you shit about it. And I think that's really important. And I've talked to people at the AKC about it, all this. There's a huge difference between the puppy mills, the online breeders and all this crap, and somebody who's really followed the lines and is doing a really solid job of keeping the lines and the genetics of these dogs in place.
No, I agree. And I think, unfortunately, the mass public lumps everybody who breeds dogs into the same category.
Totally.
You've got, these people that border on militant about, fuck you if you breed dogs, like, you're a bastard, you're a scourge to society, and you're why the shelters are filled, and all this other stuff. And it's like, even to your point, you just want a pet. I agree 100%. I'll take it even a step further though, in that there are some dogs in shelters that, because of just such inferior breeding practices coupled with isolation or a lack of exposure to a lot of basic tenets of companion lifestyle while they're young, or in that first 7-8 months to a year of their life, they make pretty terrible house pets also. And so you've got people, again, their heart's in the right place, like, well, I want this dog that's shivering, that just blew his anal glands, that's growling at everybody walking by, that God, this poor bastard. And I get it, but if you don't know what you're doing, and you have no experience in training a dog through some behavioral problems, then you're going to have your work cut out for you, and it's probably not going to go real well. And so even with that, I think, even if you're not, working a dog in a specific working skill set, or hunting or service application or whatever, just having dogs that are bred down from stock, that, they're cognitive, they're, social, they're environmentally stable, they're confident. Those things transfer in every aspect of a dog's life. And when you have a dog that doesn't have any of those things, just making it a solid house pet is a challenge. And so to me, one of the biggest reasons why our shelters are so full is that, one, it's, that spaying and neutering to keep population down, I think is a crock also, is that A, if that worked, there wouldn't be as many dogs in shelters if there were. B, if you can't keep your dogs from breeding, you shouldn't have one. Like, to me, that's not the reason. And third is that, by removing the hormonal component, especially when a dog is growing, from my perspective, that's one of the biggest reasons why I see people having trouble with their dogs, is being spayed or neutered prior to physical maturation.
1,000%.
Because you've got this dog that's essentially stuck as a puppy because it didn't have the hormones required to be able to fully mature, and so you're dealing with this dog that acts like a 6-month-old dog its entire damn life. And you think you're doing the right thing, responsible breeder wise, and frankly you're not. And it's not the mass public's fault. I think there's an enormous amount of misinformation out there, and I catch hell for it all the time when I recommend people to not spay and neuter their dogs unless medically necessary. I'm not opposed, in certain circumstances. I've even done it myself, but to me, that's not the answer. The answer is, really, really sound breeding practices coupled with people understanding how to communicate to a dog non-verbally, just using, body language and reinforcement training to set the example. But, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, and I know you run into that all the time. But.
I mean, I have this battle where it's like, I'm not a big fan of spay and neuter, but I see these morons go into the shelter, and they get, some gangbanger goes in the shelter in L.A., and, and I'm going to be caught on my shit saying I'm politically incorrect, but, I don't think these people should have dogs. If you can't keep a dog fenced, if you can't be responsible enough with your dog, if it's off leash, you can't call it back like I can with my dogs, and I know you can with your dogs, you shouldn't have a fucking dog. Like just get a pet dog, get like a gerbil or something, right? Like, be safe. Because it's killing our society. And then what we do is we punish people who want to have an intact dog, not necessarily you want to breed it, but you just want it to be. I always said at this point, when we're pushing the spay and neuter thing, I'm going to catch so much shit for the animal rights people, and you know what? I don't care. But if this is the problem, pet overpopulation, then irresponsible people shouldn't have dogs. But we're creating a third sex, right? We've got male dogs, female dogs, and we've got these neutered dogs who are super aggressive to intact dogs, by the way. Nobody wants to talk about that. And then they're at this physically immature level, and they don't develop. Also, they're higher risk of bone cancer. There's all these issues with their growth plates not being closed before they neuter them. And then you fall into more problems later on, and then they end up in the shelter again anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I agree 100%. And I similarly, I catch hell all the time for making that recommendation. I put one YouTube video out that, I just got lambasted by tons of people about how, irresponsible, and, you have this platform and you should know better and all this other stuff. And I'm like, man, you guys just don't get it, because, to me, if that policy worked, there wouldn't be the most dogs in shelters in the history of our country right now. Like, clearly that's not solving the problem. The problem is that people are lazy. They don't know what they're doing. And you've got a bunch of people breeding dogs that shouldn't be. And you can't really regulate that. By spaying and neutering dogs that wouldn't have ended up being bred anyway, that's not fixing the problem.
That's the key.
So,
You know, that's
Yeah, I
you
mean,
just
so
you
to me,
stumbled
it's
on
like,
it. You know, you stumble
yeah,
on it.
I mean,
They're not going to be bred anyway. I'm not breeding my dogs. You know, but these people who live in the shitty neighborhoods, I'm not going to say what they are, but they're out there breeding these dogs, selling them for $100 on Craigslist, and they're the problem. Like, you got to get, you know, first of all, people shouldn't be
yeah.
buying those dogs. These people should be smart enough to go, if I'm not going to get a good dog, you know, I'm not going to get a dog. And
Well, yeah, and so
contributing.
that,
Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, I mean, and so, I mean, to me, so that's the problem, right? Is that people, by way of being, manipulated by our society, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is saying adopt, don't shop,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, so to me, that's creating this enormous demand
Mm-hmm.
for these shitbred dogs,
Mm-hmm.
and continuing this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
You know, so if the consumer said, you know what, we're not buying the bullshit anymore.
Right.
Like, yes, there's going to be a generation of a shitload of dogs being euthanized or sitting in shelters or whatever, but that has to happen at some point,
Mm-hmm.
or it's just going to continue litter after litter after litter after
Yeah.
litter. Is that if the demand is now selective, is saying, I'm not taking that bullshit. I want
Right.
a well-bred, well exposed,
Mm-hmm.
dog that comes from dogs that are exactly what I'm looking to have.
Mm-hmm.
That fixes the problem in and of itself. You can't regulate or mandate or legislate manners, good behavior, good breeding practices.
Right.
We've been trying forever, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah,
I mean,
won't
the
work.
only way to do it is to make the demand a certain way. And so, to me, that not only does the adopt, don't shop mantra not work, it actually makes the problem, at a minimum, keeps it as bad as it is, and in some instances makes it worse. Because again, it's just fueling, these idiots that breed dogs that have no business being bred, and flooding the market with it, because they're either being bought on Craigslist or they're being adopted out of shelters, and so, that's really the biggest reason why I started the online training, a few years ago when I did, is just request after request after request of these people that, are trying to learn, and they're just, there's not the resource that I saw fit, of being able to do it. And so I was like, well, let me give this a shot. And that's the whole reason I did it. But, to me, there has to be an understanding,
Yeah.
that the demand has to be geared a certain way, or all you're doing with that adopt, don't shop policy is fueling a demand for shitbred dogs that are filling shelters. And let's not bullshit either. People think, this is another pet peeve of mine, is that, shelter dogs you're still buying a dog. That adoption fee is, guess what? It's still fueling that same market, because every shelter out there, I mean, is there really that big of an incentive for them to be empty? And then now their funding goes away and all of their employees don't have jobs, and they're sitting there like, okay, well, now what? So they're making money off of you adopting dogs. They call it an adoption fee, but you're still spending several $100s, just like you would buying a puppy out of Craigslist. So, to me, it's such a misinformation campaign that our society has beholden on to us, that that really just continues to cause that problem. And I think if the powers that be that have that type of platform at ASPCA, HSUS, et cetera, really wanted to change things and empty shelters, they would say, okay, well, what we've been doing for the last 40 years isn't working.
Right.
So why don't we figure out something else? But they don't. Well, why don't they? Because I think it's like with big pharma and drugs. I don't know that there's really that big of a desire, other than a manufactured, aesthetic one that they want you to think exists, but it really doesn't. Because if it did, it would be empty. They would be empty, and they're not. So it's not that they don't have the resources. Our shelters are better funded and better equipped right now than they ever have been in the history of our society. We have more of a surplus in terms of being able to have the resources to donate to pet dogs and dog rescues and shelters, et cetera, than we ever have before in the history of our country and probably the world. And look where we're at. We've got the most dogs in shelters that we've ever had. So clearly, that method of approach is not the answer.
And hey, while we're pissing off people, I want to stumble on another thing that'll really rile people up, is this whole pit bull problem. And I've done more to save pit bulls. I've put play groups together with 15, 18 pit bulls at a time, because I can do it. But what happens is there's this huge misinformation. I've had people criticize me about pit bulls, and they don't really realize what I've done to try to save these fucking dogs. But this whole thing of everybody says, oh, pit bulls are great dogs. Pit bulls are great dogs. And I said, no, they're not. Like, I don't think Malinois are great dogs. I don't think pit bulls are great dogs. I don't think I don't think there is a great dog breed. And when you get into this misinformation, like, well, pit bulls make great pets. Then you read about a pit bull tearing a kid's face off. Then you say, well, Rottweilers are great pets. Well, the Rottweilers killed this woman. And people get into this thing, like there was this thing I read years ago where people read pit bulls are great dogs, so they go to the shelter and then they get a pit bull. And then the dog has dog aggression issues, of course, because there's such an interference of breeding with nerves and terrier genetics that the dogs have a natural tendency towards dog aggression if they're not really trained well and socialized well at an early stage, which many people who get these dogs don't do. Not saying all, right? I'm not saying all of them. But then they return that dog to the shelter, they get another one. Then they go, well, shit, that one's bad too. So they go, but I've heard all these campaigns from these huge organizations like Best Friends and the ASPCA saying they're great dogs. And then this 100-pound woman goes out and she says, well, you know what, I guess I got 2 bad ones. I get a third one. I'll go to Craigslist or whatever. And then they get that dog, and then that dog's fucked up, right? So now you have 3 times as many pit bulls in the shelter. And the pit bull problem, it's I hate to say it like that because I hate to criticize any one dog, but there's so many of these fucking dogs in the shelter because people are so irresponsible. Like, you don't see that many Malinois or Rotties or German Shepherds in the shelter. You see the percentage, but it's not like this overwhelming thing because people are being crammed down their throats. You got to get a pit bull. It's a great dog. And it's doing a disservice.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, there's 2 really main problems with that is that, number one, I agree in that, people always ask me, what's your favorite breed? And I say, well, I don't have a favorite breed.
Yeah,
the reason I don't have a favorite breed is because I've seen really awesome examples and really shitty examples of every breed.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, breed is especially at this point in this country with most breeds, to me, the number one breed in the country is the American domesticated pet dog.
Mm-hmm.
And that breed has a shitload of different paint jobs,
right?
Because there's so many generations of, early neutered and non-selectively bred dogs that, 100 years ago, if you read AKC or the UKC Book of Dogs of what that breed standard and description is, it's like, was bred to hunt lions and, defended livestock from, wolves and bears,
right.
And
I think I lost Mike there. I'm going to call him right back. Hang on. All right, so go ahead. You were saying about these, the AKC. So the AKC and the UKC 100 years ago, you were mentioning that they had this different picture of the American house dogs.
Yeah, so 100 years ago, if you look at the AKC or UKC Book of Dogs, I've got one from 1927 that's really neat. To read what that breed standard was back then, and it still technically exists.
Mm-hmm.
But all of the dogs living in people's houses and backyards in today's day and age are so far removed from what that original breed standard was and what they were selectively bred for. It's laughable. Right. That they're not even close. And so you've essentially got, the American domesticated house pet that comes in different sizes, different coat lengths, and different color variations, but it's all basically the same damn dog. And so when people, say, well, this breed is this and this breed is that and whatever, the only time from my experience where that applies is if that breed, if the dog in question that you're talking about is bred from a breed that is from lines that has been selectively bred from its inception to maintain that breed's standard of excellence as it relates to that working environment, then yes, that breed typically is going to exhibit certain traits overwhelmingly more common than not. However, even within those, I've selectively bred a ton of working litters over the last 20 plus years, and I can tell you from experiences that even taken 2 phenomenally bred, phenomenally trained, phenomenally genetically paired animals, let's say we have a litter of 8 puppies, not all 8 of them are just like their parents.
Right.
You'll usually get a few that are really nice, a few that are average, and a few that are below average. And so similarly, I can't stand, this this reliance on, well, this breed is this, and so it just keyholes. To me, it's, I'll probably catch hell for this. It's almost like a modern day form of animal racism in a way, or animal prejudice, and that you're assuming that just because this breed is, or this dog is down from a certain breed, that it's going to be X, Y, and Z, and that's just not the case.
Yep.
And so I think, breed is a really good, very generic and basic starting point, but that's really as far as it goes, and the rest is the individual. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about that dog specifically. Yes, I care about and I'm going to take into consideration what the litter mates look like, what the parents look like, if there is some sort of pedigree paperwork on the dog that I can look at the dog's background, if I'm familiar enough with it to have an idea of what line is bringing what to the table, which I do in a number of different hunting breeds, but in a lot I don't. So I mean, to me, a pedigree means nothing if I don't know what those lines are anyway. And frankly, pedigrees are so easy to forge and fake anyway. It almost doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're taking the breeder's word for it, irrespective of what the piece of paper says. So, to me, yes. I mean, people get way too wrapped around the axle of, oh, well, I have a Dalmatian and you know how they are. It's like, well, I mean, unless it's down from, unless it's down from stock that's been selectively bred for generations, which there's about a 0.0001% chance that that's the case if it's just some dog you bought out of the paper or pulled out of a shelter. So, I'm going to evaluate it the same way I would any dog, which is at face value and without any breed or sex or size or age bias, and just take a look at the dog, that's sitting right in front of me and see what I have. But I think, pit bulls unfortunately fall into the category of, because they look a certain way, have attracted certain elements of society that don't lend themselves to the, to the best aesthetic or perspective or look or whatever. And so, certain breeds, again, because of the way they look, they're muscular, they look tough and they look aggressive. Same with, Rottweilers and some Dobermans and some Shepherds, and certain, breeds of dogs aesthetically look a certain way, and it attracts a certain type of person that, probably shouldn't even have a goldfish, let alone a dog. Yeah. And then, you run into, a host of problems because of it.
Of course. And it just goes on and on and on. And I think, again, we live in this apologistic society. We can't say this shit. We can't, you're racist or you're biased or you're this or you're that. And I consider it, I'm first and foremost a humanist. I want to make sure everybody's safe and, dogs are happy and safe as well. But you can't say that, the wrong people get the dogs. It goes all the way down the line. But we could talk about this for 10 hours and never get to any of the questions I've got for you.
Yeah.
So first of all, I don't want to miss this because I want to talk about, I'm going to go out of order. Your Warrior Dog Foundation, to me, again, when I started Bound Angels to help shelter dogs, and you and I have a similar thing, you're doing an online dog training thing to help people to better understand canine behavior through your experience. And people can go online and learn dog training just like they can on my site. And I think it's a fantastic resource. I think, somebody like Mike's got great skills and you can learn a lot from him. So that's a huge component, right? So we're giving back, we're making money, of course, but we're supposed to be making money. But the point is, we're giving back, we're giving people this information that they can't afford to hire us by the hour, but they can join for 10 something bucks a month and learn these amazing skills from guys like us who have paid our dues. But
absolutely,
talk about that for a second.
Sure. So, two kind of separately, I guess, the Warrior Dog Foundation was really born and bred out of necessity. Is that, back in August of 2010, I had just started my first dog company, a little over a year prior. And, was obviously fairly new to the game industry wise, although I'd been, working and training dogs for quite a while at that point even, but, just separated from the Navy and got out, started the company. And, at first it was just really, kind of focusing on, government contracts, military dogs, police dogs, federal law enforcement agencies, et cetera. And really just kind of sticking with that, doing some breedings to help supply it, whatever. And was in with a handful of other guys that were kind of doing the same thing, vendors, brokers, trainers that kind of all worked in that same circle. And a special operations unit, approached myself and a number of other guys like me in the industry saying, hey, we've got these two older dogs that, and this was at a time where, post 9/11, it was kind of the first generation of dogs that had started working for special ops groups were kind of nearing that end of retirement age where they were now trying to figure out what to do with them. And, these units are put in an impossible spot, and that, two things. One is that their mission is to be as skilled of a war fighter and effective as a unit as possible overseas, and anything that detracts from that, needs to go away. And so when these dogs are done with their service, they don't have the logistics and the resources to be able to house and home these dogs needing retirement.
Right.
And a lot of the handlers, most people ask, well, why don't the handlers take them? Well, most of these handlers, when a dog gets to that point, they retire that dog, they get another dog, and they're deploying and training constantly with it. They don't have the time or the resources to deal with the dog either. And so these two dogs basically were, shopped around of saying, hey, can somebody take these dogs? We don't really know what to do with them. And nobody would take them. We were all I even said no the first time around. I was like, what the hell do you want me to do with these two? Both had been wounded. They were both just nasty ass eater type dogs that had bitten, over 100 people a piece on purpose, bitten the right people, but have just, laid waste to savages all over the world for, better part of a decade. And that changes a dog. And so, they came back around a few weeks later and they said, hey, how about now? And I was like, well, okay, if you're asking me again, everybody has said no. What's going to happen if none of us take these dogs? Like, what are you going to do with them? And they said, well, we'll probably put them to sleep. And I said, well, that's absolutely not. So I said, send them, I'll figure it out. And, that was, it'll be 10 years ago this August. So, and that really opened the floodgate for everything. And at this point now I've taken dogs from everywhere. And for the first several years, I just did it, out of pocket. I hadn't started the foundation. I mean, at least not on paper. I'd started taking dogs and gotten more and more in over the years. And then it got to a point where 60 Minutes came back in 2013 to do a piece on me and these types of dogs. And it was at that point where I kind of decided, hey, I've been losing money and kind of hampering myself business-wise a little bit for the last several years. It's time to make this a legitimate nonprofit and launch it or whatever in conjunction with this piece. So I did that, and then we've just continued to grow and take more and more dogs. At this point, we've taken in a little over 170 dogs. Wow. We've got 24 in our care right now. We've got one coming in tomorrow, as a matter of fact, another one. And for me, it's a labor of love, and it is, a tough thing to do because you're dealing with dogs that, are either there because they're at a point in their career where they just need to be retired and they're too hard to deal with for the handler or some of the other unit members to be able to take the dog, or a number of them, I mean, about half of them at this point that come in now are dogs that are, right in the middle of their working dog career, but have just gotten to the point where they're so hard for them to deal with for a number of different reasons that they determine we're going to, get rid of this dog, wash him out, and get a new one because we just can't handle this dog anymore. And so when those are the dogs that you're getting in, day after day after day, that that's not a dog that a lot of standard, either pet dog maneuvers or even working dog techniques work on, because it's kind of like dealing with a tiger or a gorilla or a killer whale, is that, you really have to use, structuring and manipulating the environment to set yourself up for success, and then just doing a ton of reinforcement to just condition the dog to get them to do what you want to do and avoid conflict. And so that's really taught me the basis and the gist and the foundation of my online training. And most of the skills and techniques and tips and videos that I outline in there stem from having to deal with these dogs and not being able to use bravado and just that almost dominant personality. There's times where I do, and there's times where you have to be able to, as you well know, but it's that can't be the default.
Right.
With a lot of these dogs, like, you're not going to put a prong collar on them and make them do anything, or you're going to be wearing them.
Yeah.
Or you'll be wearing them for
what
the
about
rest
just
of the
alpha
afternoon,
rolling them,
so,
just alpha rolling them on the ground? And
no, I mean, similarly like that. All of those things are a guaranteed way to get to get put in the hospital. So. So that coupled with just, so many requests of, emails and social media, private messages of people asking for help, with their dog. And kind of what I found, came to the conclusion of, and working with both a lot of pet people over the years, as well as, the retired military dogs, is that it's very similar in terms of when people have problems with their dog, it's almost always for the same reasons,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a professional canine handler or your grandma and her Labradoodle.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lack of consistency. No real leadership. Not being able to communicate effectively to your dog what the expectations are, and then ultimately putting the time in. To me, if you're not doing that, again, whether you're just a pet dog person or a high level canine handler, you're going to end up in the same result, which is not where you want to be with your dog. And so, that's really where the videos came from. And similarly, like I don't have time to do one-on-one and privates and board and trains with, tens of thousands of people that are now subscribed to the online training. So, it's worked out really well. And one of the things that I add into it is I go in and, there's, some forums that I go in every Monday, and I answer questions and interact with people and then kind of expound on the content that's already there and help kind of walk them through specific problems or whatever. And so that's worked out well, as well as we're going to be launching kind of a franchise licensing type thing where we'll have some trainers somewhat strategically located that are, Trikos team dog trained trainers that are, in different parts of the country to help with people in person that's relatively close in most circumstances. So looking to do that later this year. But
that's a great idea.
It's been a really neat project and something that I didn't really know what to expect, and similarly, like, it was born out of just the request of people asking me for it. I would not have thought to do it on my own. I just had enough people asking me to do it to where I said, well, hell, I'll give it a shot and we'll see how it goes. And it's turned out to be a really, really good resource. I mean, to me, there's really nothing better, than getting feedback. And there's quite a bit of it at this point of people that have, tried several different trainers or just, have read a lot of books or done other online stuff or whatever. And say, we've finally gotten to where we want to be with our dog. And it's because we've followed your videos and done all of this stuff. And I know you get, tons of similar praises, but, to me, that's really what makes it, worthwhile and special and worth doing, because it, when you can tangibly see that you're helping people with their animals, then, that's really what it's all about.
And to kind of give, I think you experience the same thing. Like I get, I'll go to somebody's house here in Malibu, Beverly Hills and something, and they want you to wave a magic wand. I usually tell them I mix up the pixie dust on Thursdays and distribute it on Fridays, to fix their dog. But it doesn't work because you got to keep on it. So I get these people like in South America, Europe, India, and of all places too, and they say, "Man, I watched your videos. I learned my dog is better," because they take it more seriously. Even though they're only spending $10 a month, they are really taking it seriously. They're spending that, twice a day, hardcore training with the dog, building a relationship. Where people who pay you, lots of money think you're supposed to fix it. And I always think that's such bullshit. I hate that whole celebrity and rich people factor, although we make our living off those people. And I hate to, kick them in the ass for it. But they really tend to be really lazy. And I've got clients now, I'm training their assistants and their fucking gardeners to handle the dog, which, okay, I'll do it. I'll take the check, I'll cash the check. And if they're listening to the, sorry, I got to call you out on the bullshit. But, if you don't have a relationship with your own dog, then don't you have a relationship with your kids anymore either?
Yeah, I mean, to me, relationships are relationships, whether it's with your kids, whether it's with your spouse, a business owner with their employees, a coach with their athletes, a teacher with their students. I mean, they're all the same. And really the only difference is that, dogs, as you well know, we communicate with them a little differently.
Right.
But, to me, it highlights even further the nature with which we communicate with them highlights even further how important it is to have a relationship, because you can't explain anything to a dog.
Right.
A teacher, a coach, a business owner, a spouse, I mean, every one of those positions, can explain to that other person that they maybe are not having a good relationship with. Hey, I'm in charge. I'm your boss. I'm signing your check. I'm your father, whatever.
Right.
And that's understandable, because we can verbally, rationalize that. And with a dog, you can do none of that. And so it's even more important, and even further highlights that, time and engagement is their currency.
Huge.
That's the explanation, and so, if you don't have the ability to do that, or the desire and willingness to do that, then you can't outsource your relationship. And similarly, I mean, I sell personal protection dogs to generally pretty extravagantly wealthy people that are willing to pay that for the level of training and genetic caliber of the dogs that I source for them. But it's one of the things that I have to be really, really adamant about from the get-go is, hey, if this is going to work, you have to realize, like, you can't hand it off to your assistant or to your gardener or to, whoever,
Right.
And expect that this dog is going to pay attention to it, especially these dogs who are bred, raised, and trained to be able to defeat a human being 4 or 5 times its size. It's
Right.
physically capable. It's not scared of it and intent on hurting it. And that dog can rise above all that and defeat that. Well, that dog's not going to be a pushover.
Right.
Now, while you don't have to become a professional trainer or professional dog handler, you have to understand the basic tenets of nonverbal communication and just how to maintain your status in the hierarchy and in the relationship. And if you can't or are not willing to do that, then, we'll just stop wasting each other's time right now. And there's certainly times where, I talk people out of it, and that's okay. I would prefer that than for there to be an expectation that this dog is a Velcro robot that is just going to do everything that you think it should do without having to interact with it. And, no dog works that way. So, yeah, it's a big component.
I mean, I find clients because I get clients who call want a protection dog. I've talked 90% of people out of them because I just think they think it's going to just be a dog. It's going to be a switch. They're going to push a little button. It's going to go bite somebody, and they don't understand the responsibility that goes with it. But I want to kind of touch on something because you're an expert in this department. So there's pet dogs, then there's sport dogs. So like my dogs were both trained in Schutz and stuff like that. So they learn it as a game early on, and I think that's pretty obvious in any of the dogs. But the dogs, when you're dealing with a military dog, like you were just saying, these dogs they're bred and trained to go bite somebody, and they're not afraid of it. There's no fear in this dog when they're going into a dark house to get this terrorist out or something like that. But how do you differentiate between those dogs to people? Because if it's a game, like a lot of times in IPO or anything like that, you take the sleeve off, you throw the sleeve, the dog goes and bites the sleeve.
Yeah.
But for you,
go
ahead. There's a transition. I want to talk about that.
Yeah. So great question. And from my experience, it's 100% genetic. There is a component of training that exists that, certainly transfers the dog over from that. But I can tell you again, overwhelmingly from experiences that dog either has that in them or they do not have that in them. And I've certainly come across dogs in IPO and Schutzen and any of the ring sports and KNPV, in any of the bigger sports that are more kind of internationally, known and stood behind by a lot of working dog professionals. There's some dogs that are really sporty in there. I'd say, probably more than not. But there are absolutely some real ass eaters that exists in every one of those, that exist also. And so for me, really what that boils down to when I'm looking for a dog for police, for military, for personal protection, for whatever, it's all in the selection, and so I'm going to do certain tests and evaluations to each of those dogs, put them in certain situations, and based on what they do, that's going to tell me genetically, yes, this dog has it, or no, he doesn't, and there's nowhere I can go from that.
Right.
To your point of the biting the sleeve, that's kind of one of the things that I do. I mean, the most basic and most telling test that I do to a dog to see if that dog is the right fit is, back tying it or having whoever's been dealing with the dog back tying it. And I want to caveat it with this dog is both physically and mentally mature. I don't do this with dogs that are younger than that. And I don't, condone people that do. I think it's both unfair and harmful to the dog to put that kind of stress and pressure on them before they're ready for it. No different than putting a 12 or 13-year-old, 14-year-old that's physically capable. Take Mike Tyson when he was 14, could handle most grown men.
Right.
But he wasn't mentally where he needed to be. I would even argue that it took him longer than most. Right. To be mentally mature enough to be put in some of the positions he was being put in. But similarly is that they have to be in a position where they can take it. If they're not, I won't do it. And so because of that, one of the downsides is that most of the protection dogs that I sell, are at least 2.5, sometimes 3 or 3.5. And a lot of times people say, well, I want him to be, 9 months old. I'm like, well, he's a puppy.
Yeah.
And a dog that at, 9, 10 months old, a year old, that's willing to bite somebody for real. When that dog is 4, he's going to run you out of your house.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's an important distinction to make, because a lot of people don't think about that until you explain it. And then they're like, oh yeah, it makes sense. But at any rate, so, once I've established that the dog is both physically and mentally mature, then I'll have whoever's been, dealing with that dog and that the dog is comfortable with, I'll have them back tie them to a fixed object of whatever capacity. And then I walk up with absolutely no equipment. There's no sticks or whips or sleeves or anything present, not in the field, not by me, whatever. It's, when I do it at my dog training ranch, I have a garage and a tree out front that I use. And any of the equipment that I have is deep in the garage and completely out of sight, completely out of smell range as well. And I walk out there covered with something. I like to do kind of a test to see, if I throw a blanket with a sombrero and have this, weird non-human like shape and walk out, and I call it the boogeyman test.
Yep.
I just want to see that dog presented with something he's never seen before and doesn't understand, and some dogs will be defensively aggressive towards that. Some dogs will be scared of it.
Right.
Either one of those things is a red flag and not good. If the dog is scared, I stop the test right there. If he's defensively aggressive, it depends on where he's going, and also depends on how he does in the bite work after that to determine whether or not that's going to be a factor. But I don't like to see that. Right. I like to see a dog that's attentive, that, comes out, kind of checks it out. His eyes are squinted, his ears up, his tail's up. He's curious and kind of figuring out, what the hell is this? Right. But that's really about the gist of it. If I see that, I go back in the garage, I take all that off, and now I come out without absolutely any equipment. And then I do kind of a series of stalking tests and, what I call eye fucking, which is essentially just picking a fight with the dog non-verbally. But I do it in stages. I don't just come full blown at the dog. I want to see, that dog's level of confidence. And to me, the ideal temperament is a dog that's essentially a mirror. When I first walk out there, he's doing basically the same thing I'm doing. I'm not getting at him. He's just kind of looking at me like, yeah, whatever. Right. And then I'll turn into him, a little bit of eye contact, walk towards him, bow up just a little bit, and then I'll take that off of him. And just in that little thing, I want to see a change in him. I want to see him kind of bow up and be like, well, what are you looking at? Really no different than any of us walking into a restaurant. Somebody looks at you a certain way. I mean, there's some guys that you're just like, the fuck are you staring at? Right. It's that same kind of thing, is that I want to see that reaction out of the dog. And the more I do that, kind of the more he's like, no, seriously, what are you staring at? That type of behavior. And so then at that point, then I go up and I make contact with the dog, and I'll physically contact them either with my hand, or I'll take like a water bottle with like 2 or 3 ounces of water in it and give them a couple of taps with it, generally in the face or chest. And I want to see them get really angry about it, and at that point, there's generally no gray area. Either the dog comes unglued and wants to kill you, right, or he wants absolutely nothing to do with it, and so to me, at that point, like, that is your litmus, to dumb it down. I mean, there's a lot of other things I do to test, different elements of temperament and character and things like that, but they're very nuanced and ones that are, beyond the pale of your average dog owner. And this one is the most tangible to explain, is that's telling you what you need to know. That's saying, yes, this dog is absolutely gonna do what they need to do when that time comes, or no, they're not. And if you replace that dog with a human being, let's say you're trying to hire a cop or a soldier or a bodyguard, and you put him in an Applebee's, and I walk up and give him a little eye contact, and he's kind of looking at me like, what are you staring at? And I walk up and I slap the shit out of him, and that guy wants nothing to do with it. Like, there's no amount of training you can put into that guy to make him a good cop or a good bodyguard or whatever. And so, I laugh when there are, unfortunately, a lot of companies and trainers out there that, send us your dog and we'll turn him into a guard dog or whatever. And it's like, it doesn't, it doesn't work that way. I wish it did, but it doesn't, and no different than, there's only so many, people that are cut out to be Navy SEALs. That selection process is very similar. It tests to see if you have what it takes. And if you don't, there isn't an amount of training you can do to prepare yourself for it. You just don't have it. And so with dogs being that same way, that's kind of the big, like I said, litmus that tells me, like, okay, genetically this dog at least has the tools to where I know I can do something with this dog. And then from there, then it's about training, but without that, there isn't any training I can do to fix that. As long as it's there. Now we're talking orders of magnitude. And to one of your questions that I know you wanted to kind of differentiate between protection dogs, police dogs, military, and how that kind of shakes out.
Yeah.
That's really where that comes in is, if that dog was defensively aggressive towards me in the boogeyman test and has just, a hair trigger that gets, ready to fight just with, a second and a half of eye contact and kind of predatorial behavior towards him, that dog is going to be far better suited for police, military, jobs where he's going in on a twice convicted felon that's hopped up on meth and has nothing to lose. And you're going to have to deal with that guy. On the transverse, if it's going to be going into a house, I want a dog that I almost have to kind of really pull that out of him, where it's there, but it's down deep, and I've got to do quite a bit to get him to that point. That dog is going to be far more suited for, a scenario where there's going to be, UPS guys coming in and the drunk uncle tickling the kids at Thanksgiving or, whatever, where the dog's going to have a little better head on his shoulders and far less of a hair trigger. Obviously, you don't want that where milliseconds are your life is depending on them in police and military situations. So that's, my test is basically the same. I'm looking for the same thing. It's just, it's order of caliber and magnitude in terms of what dog is going to be the better fit for what working environment.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I mean, you're so uniquely suited for having been a Navy SEAL. People don't realize, the funny thing is, every time I talk to somebody, and my stepdaughter said, "Oh, this guy was hitting on me at a bar. He's a Navy SEAL." I said, "Yeah, sure." They used to all be movie producers, and now it's like every guy's a Navy SEAL. I've known two Navy SEALs, and it's like they never talk about it, right? And they're usually there's no ego. A buddy of mine was a Navy SEAL. We used to hang out years and years ago. And, he'd say, "Man, you're the only guy I can hang out with where I know that we can take 2 or 3 guys each and we don't have to worry about it, because everybody wants to be their friend because, you guys are badasses." And it is pretty much the coolest job in the world, I think, what you did.
Well, we have kind of a running joke where, we say the post 9/11 combat, there's about 4,500 or so, SEALs that have served during that time, and I know all 200,000 of them. Is it because they're everywhere? I mean, it boggles my mind, frankly, to see people that are willing to lie about that. I just don't get it. But to your point, for sure, it has paid huge dividends for me in. Having certain elements of having been to war, having been through the training, having been an instructor, selecting, young men for this training and for that job, gives you a very unique perspective on kind of what it takes that, when the shit really hits the fan is, what are you going to need to be able to depend on? And, that's something that you have to understand what that looks like to be able to select for it. And a lot of people don't.
For sure. All right, so being a Navy SEAL is the coolest job in the world. I mean, I can't imagine the amount of work. I went through martial arts for years, and I know how hard that was. And I mean, it compares nothing to being a Navy SEAL, and I would never even compare any of it to what I did. So I've got the utmost respect for you, and I think, what's important when people are looking for a dog, again, and we talked about the difference between, you have to know personal protection dogs. You have to live in a house with kids and neighbors coming over and the UPS guy coming over, where a sport dog, same thing. But when you're talking about, the difference between a dog that you're sending in, like that, a buddy of mine trains cop dogs out here in Oxnard. These dogs get sent in, they have no idea what they're going into. But they do know because they're going to bring the shit. Like they're not going to go, "Oh my God, I got spooked by the guy around the corner." Their only option is to move forward, which is like what a soldier does. Right? Yeah. So, and that's an important part to differentiate. So when you have these dogs from the Warrior Dog Foundation, which if you guys want to make a donation today, go to the Warrior Dog Foundation, because this is a great American foundation and it's helping these dogs. These dogs have protected our great country with guys like Mike. These dogs need a second chance, and Mike is giving them that chance. So please just drop $10 or just skip a couple Starbucks or some stupid movie or something you're going to go see, and drop some cash on this organization. It's really worthwhile. But how do you like determine if you've got one of these ass biting dogs? Who can you like get the dog to? Who can adopt that dog and give it, because it deserves respect. It's protected our country. Like, how do you draw that line? It's got to be so hard.
Sure. Well, first, I appreciate the sentiment and the plug for the foundation. I will say, to dovetail onto that, we rely solely on civilian or private sector donations. We do not receive any federal funding. They don't have any allocated yet. Hopefully, they will soon. But
they should.
But there isn't any. So we've been very fortunate to have some very generous and gracious folks out there nationwide that have done an amazing job supporting us over the years. To your question, it is tough, and again, there's no shortage of people that are willing to, take these dogs and retire and rehome them. The problem is they either don't have the environment and the resources, or they don't have the experience required, and many times it's both.
Right.
One of the things that is kind of a checklist that we have is that you've got to own your own home. Mm-hmm. You've got no young children, and by young, that are under the age of teenage years.
Right.
And no other pets with mm-hmm. a certain size square footage, 6-foot privacy fenced in backyard. Mm-hmm. There are some exceptions, depending on what the exterior of the backyard is. If it's, out in the middle of, an acreage in Montana and
right.
it's private and it's not privacy fenced, then that's fine. But
mm-hmm.
Each is a case by case example. But that just kind of gets your foot in the door of saying, okay, you at least qualify to get on the phone with.
Right.
And many times, the people that are willing to do it, they've got several other pets, or they've got young kids, or well, we don't have we've got a 4-foot wrought iron fence, but and they're not willing to do the privacy thing and whatever. Yeah. And so it does make it difficult, because again, I can't stress enough that the reason that we have these dogs is not because they're easy to deal with.
Right.
Every one of these dogs are dogs that either, whatever the case, the unit that they were coming from was willing to put these dogs down mm-hmm. Instead of trying to have one of their own people take them.
Right.
So when you think about it, and that's not a dig on them. That's not saying that they don't care, they don't have the heart. It's that what the important realization from that is that means that this dog is that big of a pain in the ass to deal with, that they can't even handle it. And these are working dog professionals. So
right.
Yes, if a professional canine handler and his training group and leadership can't get this dog to where they need to even be able to retire it, there's a real high probability that you're not going to have that skill set and resource right. either, and so the nice thing is that, we don't have a timeline. So, when we get the dog in, first and foremost, our priority is to just act as a resource / sanctuary to be able to offer these dogs a place and ultimately not be euthanized, to walk around the kennel and see, 24, as of tomorrow will be 25 dogs, that every single one of them, would have been in a box filled with ashes on somebody's desk or fireplace mantle if we hadn't taken them. That hits you right in the feels for sure.
Yeah.
Every single time, because they all are unique. They all have their own story. They've all, saved, countless lives and have, changed the course of history for a community. And we don't take that lightly, but, so we do, and again, what I really kind of the backbone of my online training is we, manipulate the environment using both environment, food, reinforcement, positive reinforcement from a day-to-day standpoint, just, reinforcing basic behaviors or the absence of non-desirable behaviors, like growling for, looking at them a certain way, or grabbing their collar, or trying to get them to go back into a crate or a kennel run, or, it's working with them in those environments and just using, no pressure and just kind of letting them unwind and be a dog, and using lots of food and again, reinforcement to just get these dogs to kind of unwind and realize that the world isn't as nasty a place as maybe they thought or expected. And so, we'll spend months or even years. We've had some dogs that we had for over 3 years of working with them before they were able to be retired out, and we ultimately did. We've had some that have naturally passed before we got to that point. And that's that's for sure the toughest part of running this foundation, is that you're dealing with these warrior dogs that are, again, they're grumpy and a pain, but they're in their end of life stage,
Yeah.
most of them.
How old would you say, Mike?
And so
what's the average? Because I know the dogs usually go into the military 2 to 3, right? That's when they start their terms of service.
Yeah, and I would say, on the dual purpose side, the bite dog and detector dog, they're usually wrapping up when they're, 8, 9, maybe 10.
Okay.
No different than people is that, because the apprehension side is such a physical activity, just like with human beings, we get to a point when you start to get there's not a lot of professional soldiers in their 40s.
Right.
I mean, there are some,
right.
But that 19 to 35, 36 is kind of the window on people. And so, 3 to 8 or 9 is about, that 5 or 6 year period is kind of the prime of a dog. So usually, in the upwards of 10 is when we get them. Sometimes we'll get them at 3 or 4 years old if they're just such a hassle for them to deal with, and they've put 9 or 10 people in the hospital that they weren't supposed to, and and they've just become more of a liability than anything else. And we certainly get them. About half of them at this point, are kind of right in the middle of their prime and just too much dog for whatever unit, but.
Is the military using mostly dual purpose dogs now?
Mostly, yeah.
Oh, they are. I didn't know that. I did not know that.
Yeah. They still, there are some applications where they have single purpose detector dogs. And same with police, and even sometimes just single-purpose patrol dogs, where they're apprehension only, and they don't do any bite work or any detection work. But most of them are generally trying to get the most bang for their buck, and have a dog that can either locate narcotics or explosives and do bite work. And one common question, do they ever have them do both? And the answer is no.
What do you mean do both?
People say, well. Do like explosive and narcotics.
Oh yeah. Talk about that for a second, because I think that's a really good topic. A lot of people don't understand why that is, and I'd love to have you explain it to them.
Sure. So the general gist of it is that it's one or the other from a safety standpoint. Is that if you've got especially on the explosive side, when you have an explosive detector dog, you don't want them indicating on anything other than explosives, because imagine you're a handler in a real world sweep, the mayor or the president or whoever is coming through, and you're tasked with doing it, and the dog hits on a closet.
Right.
Okay, well, is that hand sanitizer? Is it is it did somebody leave a roach clip in there or try to stash meth in there? I mean, who knows?
Right.
So the biggest reason why they don't do that is for that reason, is to just keep it very, very simple. Is the dog's either finding drugs or finding bombs or finding human remains, and you just kind of keep it to one discipline.
Right.
Because again, in training, you can do whatever you want, but in the real world, you really only want them working or looking for one thing rather. So that coupled with just narcotics, there's the fewest number of target odors in narcotics. Most people do 5 or 6, depending on whether or not weed is legal in your state.
Right.
Which is pretty cut and dry and easy to do. On the explosive side, there's dozens of odors. There's kind of the basic 8 that everybody typically imprints the dog on initially, and then from there it depends on what environment and what you might be running into. If I have an explosive dog in Afghanistan, that's going to be very different from an explosive dog in downtown Los Angeles. So, we're going to be looking for way more, homemade explosives and stuff utilizing the methods that they use to make HME and roadside bombs and things like that over in Afghanistan, whereas here it's going to be with American products and probably stuff with more conventional methods probably, but it's just going to depend on the environment that they're operating in. But but that is a very common question. People, why don't you have them find everything? And that's generally why we don't.
Right. I mean, that's such great information. I mean, all those things are so fascinating to me. I mean, I didn't even know there was that many. I know the 8 that the dogs start on, because I've worked with Goofy just for play on the 5 narcotic detection sense, which is so much fun. I mean, like all this stuff with nose work training and stuff like that. I think it's such a great job for even a pet dog to learn, because it's so much fun and it puts their heads to use. It makes it really clear to them.
For sure. I mean, that's one of the big principles I work on in the online training, is talking about that mental stimulation. I mean, I know you're plagued with a lot of the same issues of, hey, my dog is an Energizer bunny. I can't wear him out no matter how much exercise I give him, he's still a nightmare in the house. And, my first question is, what are you doing in terms of shaping behavior or mental engagement? What are you teaching him? How are you getting him to use his mind? Well, I'm not. Well, so now you're physically conditioning your dog to be an even bigger and better pain in your ass by taking him for 8-mile runs every morning. Now you've just conditioned him. Now he's in phenomenal shape and needs even more of that. And it's something, no different than, if we, when you're in high school or college or, you're stressed at work, you may be doing absolutely nothing physical whatsoever, but your mind is so taxed that you're exhausted.
Yeah.
And so, for dogs, it's, it can be something totally arbitrary. I encourage everybody to set up a classroom in their house, backyard, garage, spare room, whatever, where there's as little, stimulus and distraction as possible and shape behaviors in there. It could be something as simple as taking an upside down or a food bowl and turning it upside down and teaching the dog to get all 4 paws on it, through shaping of the behavior and just getting that dog to think, and whatever it is. I mean, targeting his nose to go touch, a door jamb or, a spot on the couch or, whatever.
Post-it
place
note.
command where it's going away. Yeah, I mean, you name it, so just little exercises like that, especially for the people out, I live in northern Michigan and it's, January and there's a ton of stuff you can do inside that's going to wear your dog's ass out.
Right. But still get him out.
Nothing to do.
I have so many issues with people saying my dog doesn't like to go out in the rain. Well, fuck it. Just take him out.
Yeah.
Like when I get a puppy,
anyway.
When one of my puppies is a puppy, I take him out in the rain. I roll around the mud with him. I just want him to be a tough dog. I mean, I think that's the other thing, this society we have now, where kids are so conditioned to play Fortnite, but they can't even, throw a punch. It's just insane to me.
Yeah,
and that's what they're doing to dogs.
Don't get me started on kids.
Oh, I can't. I mean, I hear about it all the time. I taught karate for years, and I saw these kids. This is a real quick story. This mother came in. She goes, "My Jimmy's going to get his green belt today." I said, "No, he's testing for his green belt." She goes, "Well, he's not going to fail." And I said, "What are you, fucking psychic? Like, how do you know?" And it's everybody gets a trophy. Everybody gets first place. And I think it's the death of our society. I mean, I really, really do. My mother kicked my ass. I went to school. I got my ass kicked every day going to and from school because I couldn't speak the language. I studied karate, and I just learned, you just adapt, you just work through it. Nowadays, it's, you're being bullied, you got this, you got that. And dogs are treated like, I mean, I don't want to say the word, but, I'll get shit for it, but they're just treated like little babies the whole time. Oh, he doesn't want to go in the snow. He doesn't have a fucking choice. We're going out,
Yeah. Well, yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, a lot of times, people say, a lot of dog trainers say, don't treat your dogs like kids. I would say treat your dogs like kids, so long as you're treating your kids the way kids ought to be treated, which is not like, most people treat their dogs.
No.
Like that's the whole problem is that, you can't coddle them. And just like with everything, I mean, kids, dogs, people, there's a time and a place for getting in somebody's ass, getting in the dog's ass and jerking a knot in their tail and giving them a correction. But just like with everything else, it's got to be balanced. Unfortunately, just like with politics in this country, is you've got, two ends of the spectrum that are extreme. You've got people that, I'll fucking make that dog. You send him here. It's all compulsion. It's all prong collar. There's absolutely, but then on the same end of the spectrum, to me, all positive is equally as imbalanced. I mean, the good without the presence of bad isn't good anymore.
Amen.
To me, the result or the consequence for not doing what's expected and what needs to be done, if that is just the withholding of a reward, well, you're going to have yourself in trouble. I use the analogy with kids. If you've got a third grader that you're trying to teach arithmetic and he doesn't get it and you smack him,
right.
Well, no, he's not going to learn that. Right. But on the same token, like if you've got this third grader and you say, hey, make sure that you do the dishes and that your room is clean before you go outside. And he says, hey, fuck you, Dad. Right. He's getting his ass kicked.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That response isn't, okay, well, you don't get ice cream tonight then.
Right.
No, that doesn't work.
Exactly.
So, it's really not that complicated, but unfortunately when people, hover at that extreme far end of the spectrum and they're using emotion, and they get so emotional about everything and try to, project it onto everybody else what they think is best without any real experience to back it up. It's a recipe for disaster.
Well, they're dictated by emotion, not by logic or strategy. And I always thought the best way to solve a problem is through strategy. Yeah, and
100% it
and
is.
people don't want to do that. I catch shit from people. Yeah, it's funny because I'll put a prong collar or an e-collar on the dog and work with the dog. I'll use treats and toys with the dog and work with them like that. I think that's the problem nowadays, and this is the issue I have. I don't talk shit about other dog trainers, but I think one problem is they're all fucking keyboard jockeys. So they're all like watching me and then they're saying, well, I can do it better. But you look at their channel, they've got shit on their channel. Like I've never seen them train a dog.
Yeah.
They haven't put a title on a dog. They haven't done nothing.
Yeah, and to me, like I don't ever go on anybody else's page or site or whatever and offer my expertise,
right.
because they're not asking for it.
Yeah, why would you, right?
The only time I give recommendations if it's customers / subscribers of mine that are asking me questions and asking for my input. Like, agreed, it boggles my mind how many people's opinion that I never asked for that I can't help but get over and over.
Right.
And it's like I don't remember fucking asking you.
Right.
And to me, like if you think I'm a terrible trainer, hey, that's your opinion and that's fine.
Totally okay.
But like to come on my page or my social media profiles or whatever and just run your mouth about how I'm doing a shitty job. Like, again, it's just like in politics, like, blowing somebody else's candle out doesn't make yours shine any brighter.
Exactly.
Like if you took that time and energy and making sure that everybody knew your opinion on how fucked up I am, if you allocated that time and energy into getting better, you'd be a superhero.
Exactly.
But
that's what goes on now, though. I think it just goes on. Like I said, people criticize me. Oh, you're using a prong collar. Why would you do that? And then on the other side, people saying, well, why are you just giving the dog treats? And I think, well, why don't you just fucking watch the whole system and the whole cycle? You might understand more, right?
Yeah.
But that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They've got nothing else to do. And sometimes Janet's like, well, you should respond to that person. I said, why? Like, it costs me, I charge a lot of money to respond to shit. I'm not going to go do it to some idiot who doesn't like me on my page. Let his opinion stay there. And usually people will criticize him themselves. But that's these people just want attention. That's what they want. And that's what people do when they're training dogs. The dog does something bad. They give the dog the attention. They yell it. They hit it. They do this. They do that. And they never really communicate with the dog. And I think that's what you're really talking about, which I love about your books too, by the way. You've got 3 books that people, whether you train dogs or not, if you love dogs, you should read these books. Trident Canine Warriors is it's a great story. I read it years ago, and I think it's got really great things. I haven't read the other 2. I looked through the Team Dog, How to Train Your Dog the Navy SEAL Way, and I think it's got amazing advice. Because people always say, have you written a book? And I haven't. But if I would write a book, I would aspire to write something as good as these books you've written. And people should read them. You get them on Amazon, you get them on Barnes & Noble. You can even get them like on the Kindle too, right?
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words, and it's a hell of a compliment coming from you. I appreciate it. Just to clarify, I guess, so Trident Canine Warriors, the second book, which is called Navy SEAL Dogs, it's just the young adult version of Trident Canine Warriors. So if you've read one or the other, there's no reason. As much as I'd love to sell you both books, there's no reason to read both of them.
Fuck it, let them buy it.
It's the same story. Yeah, buy them for your kids.
Exactly. It's a great gift.
The adults can read the Trident Canine Warriors, and the Navy SEAL Dogs was a scholastic project that they approached us to do, which was really neat. But and then Team Dog is just, again, it's the conversation that we're having, kind of. It's the one, I guess I wouldn't call it a regret, but thing that I wish I had thought out a little more in depth is the title of that book. I think misleads people to think that it's training dogs to be SEAL dogs. And the reason I have the subtitle of Training Your Dog the Navy SEAL Way is and then again, it's lost on the consumer, and I get that, and that's totally on me, but is that, the SEAL teams have the reputation that they have for a number of reasons. And they have their combat success for a number of reasons. And it's not just because of the training. It's all of it. And that's what I try to really highlight in the book. It's relationship, it's training, it's nutrition, it's keeping them in good shape, it's
teamwork,
engaging them, it's setting yourself up for success via teamwork. And with SEALs, it's the same way. It's proper selection, it's training, it's eating a certain way, it's disciplining yourself, it's having great intelligence, it's having great platforms and assets for for quick reaction or for air support or whatever. It's all of these things that are stacking the deck in our favor to be able to come up with this finished product. Obviously, that's way too long for a subtitle, so I just went with that. And unfortunately, it's misled a lot of people to think that, like, well, I don't need my dog to find bombs and bite people, so
Right.
this book isn't for me. And so that's, again, it's my bust. But that's really the gist of the book. It's not a step-by-step manual of how to get your dog to
Right.
heal in a focused attention heal for,
Mhm.
for trial readiness. It's the basic principles and kind of the foundations of how to have a good relationship and get your dog to the level that you want, no matter what that is, utilizing all of these different principles, no matter what A and B are.
Right. And I think that's maybe the takeaway from our conversation here. If I could wrap this whole conversation up in one piece, I think where you and I really agree on stuff, except for hating idiots, is that, life is about, whether it's martial arts or being a Navy SEAL or training your dog, it's about this bonding relationship. And when people can kind of pull those pieces together, right? It's not about these idiot dog trainers who tell you, oh, just make your dog tired and then train him. Well, fuck. I mean, I don't want to train a tired dog. I want to train a dog. I want to take him out of the can when he's on fire, and I want to start working his behaviors at that point, because that's where he's going to get fucked up and get in trouble. And these other trainers say, well, give him, walk him for 6 miles and then train him. Well, that's easy. I can train any dog who's tired.
Yeah, no, I agree. And to me, I think one of the biggest problems that is out there is the cookie cutter mentality. Is that what I may use for one dog, I would never try with another one, and vice versa. And I would agree. Like, in a lot of dogs, if I have a good relationship with them, and I've kind of been feeding through training and having a very structured process, and they're responding well, then I want that dog all piss and vinegar, and I'm using that energy to my advantage. If it's a dog maybe I don't have a great relationship, where he's really sharp and really averse to being touched, and I need to trim his nails, then I may run his dick into the ground for 6 miles and then trim his nails so that he's less willing to, so it's just, to me, I think where people get into trouble is the one size fits all. Like, well, if you have a dog, you have to do this, and it's going to depend on a lot of things. But if you utilize kind of all of these principles, it's going to make whatever you're trying to do easier. And the backbone of it, to your point in wrapping this up, is the relationship. Is that, the best analogy I like to give is a teacher.
Yeah.
Is that, and I like to use the third grade level, because that's about where dogs are. If they're a little more on the cognitive side, is that, if you have a third grader and they walk into the classroom, and the reason I use classrooms for training and tools a certain way and refer to it all that same way is because I think it's so apt, is that when that kid walks in there, if the teacher is writing something on the board and the class is just, disruptive mess, nobody's paying attention, they're throwing stuff and playing tag, and the teacher just starts writing, they're not going to learn anything. Mm-hmm. On the same token, if they walk in and they're blowing their anal glands, scared of this teacher and the ruler that's coming down, if they make even the slightest misstep, well, they're not going to learn anything there either.
Right.
Is that they have to trust and respect that teacher, that teacher has their best interest in mind. They trust the teacher, and they know that they're going to learn from it. And you've got to create that environment for them first. Yep. If you don't have that, you're wasting your time training, and that's where that relationship and then the balance comes in after that. But I mean, you see so many people that they try to hurry things, or they've got a terrible relationship with the dog, and they're putting the cart way ahead of the horse of trying to do things that relationship wise, they're just nowhere near where they need to be to accomplish that. And so, I mean, to me, that's really the crux of it all.
Yeah, it's about a relationship, because I always say that a dog builds love from respect, but respect comes out of a balance, and a balance has to be there. The dog has to respect you, and you have to understand that. And if you don't do it, you're just spinning your fucking wheels. And I think so many people do such a disservice to dogs and the dog training community.
Agreed.
So anyway, listen, I hope we can continue this conversation, because I literally had about 20 different things I wanted to talk to you about, and I got to like 3. So it was a great conversation. Yeah. So teamdog, that's .com, right? Oh, no, teamdog.pet, sorry.
teamdog.pet.
That's your online training. Trikos, is it Trikos or Trikos?
Trikos.
Trikos.com for some of the coolest bitchin' products. I mean, I'm going to order a shirt. I mean, it's the coolest logo. It's very, very cool. And my favorite, warriordogfoundation.org. If you got nothing, it's a tax write-off. Do it. Drop $10, $50. If you can do $100, I think it'd be really awesome. You're doing a service for dogs that keep our country free and great, and people like Mike who have done the same thing. Your books, Trident Canine Warriors, awesome. Navy SEAL dogs, we know that's the same, but I think people should buy both anyway. Team Dog, How to Train Your Dog, the Navy SEAL Way. You're going to talk about a good, balanced way to understand dogs. Like I said, at some point I'm going to write a book. I'd aspire to write a book as good as yours. I love your stories. You're a great author. You're a cool dude. And again, thank you for serving our country and everything you've done.
It's truly my pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time. The kind words are flattering, to say the least, and I love what you're doing also. My hat's off to you to be able to do it, especially where you're doing it. I don't know that I have the patience or the customer service acumen to be able to do what you do where you're at. So keep up the great work, and I love what you're doing.
Cool. Stand by just for 1 sec, Mike. Hang on 1 sec. All right, guys, that's it for the podcast. Thanks to Mike for being on. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, check out all of Mike's stuff. I'll put the links in the description below. If you're listening to this on one of the podcast things, check it out on YouTube. I'm going to have some pictures, some graphics of Mike in here with his work and everything he does. That's so cool. My site, robertcabral.com, you know that. All my social media, follow that. Thanks for tuning into the podcast, and I will see you next week. Take care.